Hi, everyone. There might be a lot more love available to us at any given moment than we realize. In my last video, I spoke about a time when I taught yoga at a veterans hospital, and I was totally freaked out by the horrible condition of their bodies and the hospital. And yet there was one woman who really got my attention because Mrs. Jorgensen had no legs from the knees down, and she had no teeth. She was very old. And as I was teaching the class, I would look over her and she'd go like this. She'd like bulge her eyes and stick her tongue out. And I thought she was criticizing me or the class. I later realized it was a neurological impairment. But at first I took it personally. She pretty much scared me. And then I got to know her. And she's one of the kindest, sweetest, most loving people I've ever met. And I would go and visit her and sit in her room with her and chat with her. And we kind of had a spiritual love affair going. And I remember the last time I saw her, I think she was dying, and I just held her hand. She was quiet. I looked in her eyes and she looked in mine, and we just smiled to each other and held each other's hands. And in that moment, her body like disappeared, not physically, but spiritually. And all there was the shining angel. She was just the loveliest princess of a soul. And in that moment, we transcended the idea that bodies can stop us from anything. And we were both just sitting together in the light. It was a holy, holy moment. I'll never forget that. Never saw her again, but that was a moment that changed my life. Then there was another guy in the group named Willie Vaughn. And Willie was quadriplegic. And he had no use of his arms or legs. But he was the brightest light you'd ever met. He would, when he would come into a room, everyone would light up. Hey, Willie, how you doing? Hey, how you doing? And a lot of the staff in that hospital was depressed. The staff who were depressed and the patients, I think, in some ways. And it was a rough place to be for patients and staff. But Willie turned it into a temple. He turned it into a celebration. And I think he was like an angel that God put there to light up a dark place. And when my first book, The Dragon Doesn't Live Here Anymore, came out, I invited Willie to my launch party. And they had to make lots of arrangements to get an ambulance for him and carry him and all that kind of thing. But they did it. The hospital did it as a favor to him and me. And they drove him to my house for the night. And he came and he sat in his wheelchair with his board. And we all prayed over the book, The Dragon Doesn't Live Here Anymore. And he gave a good prayer. And, it was so nice to see him get out of the hospital and enjoy that. And it was a big night for him and a big night for me too. We had a great relationship that far transcended his disability, especially on his part. He was one of choosing that. And so my point is that I developed very real relationships with these people that refuted the appearances that they were limited. You understand? In fact, I went on to teach yoga in that hospital for 7 years. And I developed some very real relationships with those people that I would have been scared off of initially, but I forced myself to keep going. Third time I was supposed to go, I forgot to go. That's how freaked out I was. But I got over it, and it turned into a blessing. Every minus is half of a plus, waiting for a stroke of vertical awareness. And we all have situations in which we think that somebody doesn't love us or like us, but they do. And that's the time, once again, to refute appearances. When I was 15 years old, my parents sent me off to a Jewish camp for the summer. And I developed a crush on this girl named Roberta Horn. And they had all the girls on one side of the lake and all the boys on the other, probably for good reasons. But once in a while, they let us get together. And one night they took us skating, this local skating rink, and I invited Roberta to skate with me. And she was like, I was totally enamored with her. And we had this lovely skate for one song, and then we let go. And um, I was in heaven. I didn't wash my hand for a week. I didn't wash it anyway, but especially that week, I didn't do it. And I continued to worship Roberta from afar on the other side of the lake. And the end of the summer came. We had to say goodbye. And I thought, what would she ever want with me? I had bad self-judgments and I was kind of awkward and I had never had a girlfriend. And what would she want with me? She's so cool. And then several years later, I want to say like 3 or 4 years later, I went to a party and Roberta happened to be there. So we connected again and I noticed she had an engagement ring on. And I said, well, I have to make a confession. I said, when we went to camp together that summer, I had a major crush on you. But I thought, what would you want with me? She said, well, I have a confession to make too, Alice. She said, I had a major crush on you. But I thought, what would you want with me? We'll talk about getting gobsmacked. I almost fainted. And then she said something that was very poignant. And she didn't mean it in a nasty way, but it was a very lovely statement. She said, who knows, Alan? She said, if you or I had more courage that summer, then maybe this would have been your ring on my finger. And destiny, it wasn't destined for us to be together. It's just the way it worked out. It was all fine. But maybe she came to teach me that big lesson that, or I thought I was unlovable, I was, and vice versa for her. So we all make up stories, don't we, about how the world is withholding love from us, how some people don't like us. Maybe they don't, but maybe they do. The ego wants to jump into any ambiguous situation and make up a story condemning us. Meanwhile, spirit wants to jump in and make up a story blessing us. I used to teach at an annual conference called the Human Unity Conference. And they gathered various spiritual leaders and authors and teachers. It was a lovely conference, and they would just talk about holding the space for the planet. It was a really beautiful thing. And during one conference, there were two people I encountered who did things that I thought indicated they didn't like me. I won't even say what they were. They weren't bad things, but they were casual remarks that had nothing to do with me that I thought applied to me. And one was Dr. Jerry Jampolsky, a wonderful teacher of A Course in Miracles. And the other was Wally Amos, the founder of famous Amos Cookies. You all know his image. And so I kind of distanced myself from these two guys because they don't like me and I don't like them. And I made up a story. So the next year, the conference reconvened and I had some kind of travel delay and I came in late. And all of the presenters were having a luncheon together. And I walked in and they were all eating lunch. And the entire group of maybe 50 people, two people got up from their lunch and came to personally greet me at the door. One was Jerry Jampolsky, and the other was Wally Amos. The people I thought liked me the least were actually the kindest and most welcoming and congenial to me. And that was another gobsmack moment when I realized that I made up a cockamamie story about these two wonderful men that was just entirely untrue. I made up a cockamamie story about myself that was untrue. So take a moment now to think about any situations in your life you believe that love is absent. Maybe you had a fight with a family member. Oh, goodness, I just thought of an amazing story. So one of my clients, Sandy, had not spoken to her sister for over 20 years, like 20 or 25 years. And it was a source of great sorrow for Sandy because they used to love each other, but they had a fight, and you know what happens after fights sometimes. So Sandy indicated to me in the coaching class, my coaching room, that she really wished that she could reconcile with her sister, but she didn't know if she could. Out of the blue, she gets a call from her sister after many, many years of no speaking. And she notices that her sister's phone number is from Sonoma County, Northern California. And she said, what are you doing up in Sonoma? She said, well, I moved here. And the reason I'm calling you now is that many, many years ago, you gave me a little plaque. It was a Japanese character, which means water. And on the back of this plaque, it says anybody who has this in their house will be saved from fire because this represents healing power of water. She said, you don't know this, but I live in a community. There was a massive fire. And she said, every house burnt down but mine. And I looked on that plaque and I realized, I turned it over and I read for the first time that every house will be safe from water with this plaque. That you gave this to me 25 or 30 years ago. And so with your gift, you may have saved my house and my life. So and they had a big reconciliation after that. They became friends and began to see each other, and the love was restored. So even in the apparent absence of love between these two sisters, there was love. There was a force of love working behind the scenes. It was healing in the invisible. So I want to suggest that healing in the invisible is always happening. That enmity and discord and hatred and revenge and all the tit for tat that people do in various squabbles, that exists only at the very surface, shallow level of the human experience. At our core, there is only love. So as always, we close with a moment of deep inner knowing. I invite you to close your eyes, take some time with yourself, and think of a relationship in your life where love seems to be absent. It's probably popped into your mind already. If it has, take it. And think of that person's face, their name, the actions on their part that have apparently hurt you, perhaps what you've said or done that may have hurt them. If there's a rift, a non-communication, note that. Or if you simply think that somebody doesn't like you, you don't know why. I'd like you now to just close your eyes if you haven't already and pierce below the appearances and come to a place where love is, where no matter the appearances, you are connected with this person in spirit, that there is love there, On some level, you do love them. If you don't like the word love, say appreciate, value, recognize, honor. On some level, they love you. There is love there. There is value there. There is kindness there. There is caring and connection. And I want to suggest that on a spiritual level, there's never been any love lost. It's only in the human experience that love seems to be lost or absent. That spiritually, your relationship is thriving. It has never stopped. Only ego is aware of separation and chasms. Spirit is all about joining and bridges and oneness and wholeness. And in your mind, would you care to say anything to this person? What could you say to affirm your intention that love be the reality? And what might they say to you? That would be an indication of heartfelt desire to join. How would you feel if the enmity was behind you? How free would you be if you were not carrying this burden? How would you like to revert to original innocence? So what I'm asking you to do now is to affirm the reality of love and recognize that you're always connected to yourself, you're always connected to others, and you're always connected to spirit. Even if this person has passed on, it doesn't matter, because relationships are spiritual, not physical. The core of relationship is spiritual. You can heal your relationship with anybody, even if they left this physical world. That's the gift of grace that the universe offers us. And finally, is there anything else your deep inner being wants you to know about this relationship? Ask, what would you have me know? And so you have your instructions. If you like to stay in your visioning, stay with it. Don't stop just because we're stopping the recording. But if you'd like to open your eyes and come back, you're welcome to do that. I thank you for joining me today. These are really fun times for me. They're very meaningful for me to be with you. I get lots of lovely notes in the comments. So thank you for joining us. And I trust that this time together has restored your faith that love may actually be here, even when it seems not to be. And so it is.